When I started in the automotive industry, there were only a very, very few role models, and this changed in the last years, which I think is a very positive momentum. But we are still not yet where we should be, underlining the importance of having more and more role models in integrating personal, private life, motherhood, and also a working life.
Welcome to Get Inspired, the podcast to feel connected, empowered, and inspired by real-world role models and their stories of managing parenthood with successful careers. Sabine Scheunert heads the IT, marketing and sales department at Mercedes-Benz Cars and as a VP-level executive champions other women in IT and tech. She'll be speaking with the host of this podcast, Ricarda Engelmeyer, about parenthood and a career that took her to France, China, and back to Germany. She's not speaking on behalf of Mercedes-Benz in this podcast, so all her opinions are her own.
Sabine, welcome to MyCollective. So Sabine Scheunert is the Vice President Digital and IT Sales and Marketing at Mercedes-Benz Cars. And Sabine, you have a background in economics and mathematics, but you've been in the automotive industry for, I think, about 20 years already. And you've carved out your career in this industry as a female leader very successfully, but you have also worked a lot, not only as a manager, but also as a mentor to sort of champion for other women to be more visible in the IT sector and technology sector, but also specifically encourage young women to kind of get into this sector to start with. And this is why I think it's so fantastic that you've agreed to come and join us here in our Impulse session and speak to us here at MyCollective, mainly parental leavers, but also, as you've seen, mothers and fathers who kind of returned from their job already and have, as what we call the triple whopper, it's sort of having a baby and a life and a career. And I think with that, I would like to welcome you again, but also would love to speak a little bit about your own experience, and maybe we could kickstart with that.
Absolutely, and many, many thanks, Ricarda and MyCollective, everyone who joined this morning for inviting me. I'm really curious for the exchange and very, very happy to be here with you.
Cool. So I've heard that you, when you became a mother, was also the same time as when you moved to China. How did that go along? Can you share a little bit of how this felt for you in terms of pursuing your career, but at the same time having this first-time mother experience?
Yeah, well, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I took that decision in leaving an OEM, a German OEM, and I moved to Paris, France. There was responsible as a kind of a chief customer officer. And it's true, I went off, and during that phase in becoming a mom, the board of management of PSA at the time took the decision and asked me whether I would be the first woman stepping into a CEO position in China, running a joint venture. And it was at a time where my son was just about in turning 1. So I was used to the French culture, and I was lucky in having been able to spend a couple of years before in a French company. But nevertheless, I was still quite surprised. Somehow I did not consider that I was even on the list. And then it really came as a surprise when the HR director and also the person in charge contacted me in asking me whether I would be willing in doing that step. And I mean, everyone who just became a mom, and also I think a young dad, is at that time your life is changing, and combining private life and career was clearly a particular challenge at that time, because I think you are not used to what is going on, and therefore I was surprised, but nevertheless immediately also very positively, I would say, encouraged in starting to think whether this could not be a next step. And as you know, I responded positively to the job offer, and I moved to China with my young little boy. And I have to admit that most probably from a career perspective, it was one of the best decisions but also from a personal fact that I have been doing and I was able to take as a decision in my career. And maybe, Ricarda, we spoke already about it. You would wonder why. Because I was immediately empowered, and I was also in China able to combine extremely well support that was presented to me in China, but also the way of how, from a cultural perspective, the company encouraged me and supported me in doing that step. It was phenomenal, and I'm very, very grateful for that time with my young little boy at that time in China.
It's really interesting because I had our first son as well in India, and sort of you kind of become socialized as a mother in a very different cultural context. And I remember one of our impulse speaker, Bettina Azadik, had done a studies across 5 countries, including China, of how the model for women who go back to work and go back into career is actually working. And she always said she would have chosen the Chinese model because you have a lot of support and it's perceived as something very positive and quite natural to sort of have this support. And maybe one other point that I would like to pick up on is the way that you see this career move as a surprise and positive connotation is something that is so fantastic, because we speak to a lot of people who about parental leave, of course, and those who've had a promotion during parental leave, even if it's 10 years ago or 15 years ago, they have a glow in their face, and it's something that sticks as the most positive element, whereas there are lots of other promotions along the line in their own career, but this is something that seems to be because of the surprise effect. I mean, the idea of why is it a surprise effect? Because it often doesn't happen, right? And so a lot of people don't really see it during that time. So I think that's really great. And so now, from the top point of view, I would say, as a manager, how has your perspective changed? I mean, you're also working in an industry where there are not that many women, especially in the IT and technology sector. What are your reasons for why this is the case? And what are the challenges? Why are there so few women following these steps?
Well, first of all, you were talking about that kind of, this emotions that comes along. And I have really to say that this achievement, it's at the end a sense of achievement, but for me it was a sense of achievement in being put in that very important and very also challenging role. And what happened is that it empowered me also for any challenge that I was facing at the time in my personal life. And I think this is something I took a lot of energy out of that, call it sense of achievement, that I was capable in running, in having the trust of my organization, in being the CEO of such an important market. And it gave me a lot of empowerment, a lot of trust, that I also took out my everyday management work. I really tried to feel as empowered and positive in my personal life. And you know that a baby is not as easy to steer and to manage as most probably a lot of big projects. But at least I had that source of energy that I was able to rely on. And you asked, Ricarda, why I think that there are probably still not a lot of women, first of all, entering into very masculine-dominated industries, but also in particular, I'm in charge of IT here today since many years now. I'm really trying to fly the flag for women in IT, because most probably as a society, we have not been able yet to manage a reintegration and a true neutral access in terms of full diversity, that we are handling it yet right. And therefore, if you ask me, I am convinced that we won't manage the necessary transformational tasks if we don't have the full power of our society, and women belong to this society as well in the workforce. And this is the reason why I'm so heavy, steadily behind showing the great potential, but also indicating necessary steps towards closing the gaps that we still have towards a full diverse workforce which is able to contribute to the economical power of any country in the world.
So this has a lot to do with the pipeline, right? With filling the pipeline, but then also, getting enough girls to be interested in this, and then also studying sort of, MINT subjects. But I think what probably is most effective in this case is also to be there as a role model, right? And to actually see that there are some women in IT and carving out their career in this sector. In terms of role models, we've seen quite a change in what most mothers and fathers actually see as role models in the industry. And so role models for working models as well have shifted towards being allowing for a more active parenting role, for also generally, I would say Gen Z, for especially sort of less focused on an economic gain. You could call it life-work balance or 4-day week, or you could call it whatever, but there is a whole phenomenon of actually seeing work models in a different way. And that ultimately also changes the kind of role models that you pick and the kind of, I would say, fluid and innovative work models that are not only that are aspired to, but also that are actually possible post-new work and post-COVID. What is your take on this? Because these new working models are actually only around since new work has totally sort of taken place. The push for diversity is there. There's a lack of skilled labor. So there are actually more and more, let's say, shared leaders or part-time or other sort of, let's say, work models that do allow for a more active sort of parenting role as well. What is your take on this? Do you see this coming up? What do you think? Will this lead to a career? And what kind of success would you give these different sort of, let's say, working models?
So first of all, I totally agree with you. When I started in the automotive industry, there were only a very, very few role models. And I have to admit that this was probably also, first of all, not as many as I was probably searching for. And this changed in the last years, which I think is a very positive momentum. But we are still not yet there where we should be, and therefore I think it is absolutely important, Ricarda, what you said, underlining the importance of being a role model and having more and more role models in terms of diverse people stepping out, talking about those topics, integrating, balancing personal, private life, motherhood, and also a working life. Absolutely important. But I only wanted to raise one topic, which before we are stepping into the new work models that also Corona now was permitting us in living every day, I think it's the fact that we still have a huge gap when it comes to educational systems, and this is something that I really was able on a private note to be able to experience it, how China is doing it. And I have to admit that we have in collectively in Germany in particular a big gap between what we are offering our children towards digitization, educational possibilities. There is in a very joyful and very easy to access. They live up kindergartens differently. They have a different impression, and also when you get in contact with the schooling system in China. And again, don't misunderstand me. It's not everything is right what happens in China, but I think China represents for me today the bookend in terms of what is able. So what a country as huge as China is offering to all the children in China. And if I compare it to Germany, what we have been doing in terms of changing our educational system, and therefore I think this represents somehow also the other bookend. And I think here we have to start in closing the gap. So therefore you are right, role models, female role models are important. Yeah, but I think what is also important that we understand and we acknowledge the gap that we have in our educational system, and we are starting to compare ourselves in a positive manner to what other countries and nations are doing. And I think that we have to admit that we were not doing the necessary investments, or the investments that probably from a governmental perspective we took somehow did not have yet the effect that we would love to have. And therefore approaching girls and boys differently with digital tools is so necessary and so important, because otherwise we are not going to have the workforce in the future that we need to have for neither the big corporates, nor I would say for us in the society here in Germany. And I just wanted to make that point because I think it is important to mention it as well. And coming now, Ricarda, to your question with regards to the working models, I would say that Corona has absolutely triggered something which I hope that we can reserve because it was for me an acceleration of new and more flexible working models. And it triggered a need for a cultural change. And I think that this is a fantastic and very, very great opportunity. We were sticking extremely to what we were used to have, and I would say lonely hours, meetings, where everyone was enclosed in a meeting room, and this changed completely. So we are able to run big go-lives in IT projects now purely remotely. And I think if you would have asked us prior Corona, we would have responded, no, this is impossible. We need to be there. Don't misunderstand me. I think we are also lacking in finding and starting to unlearn things from the past, in being capable in embracing the new. And we still have to learn where also a human contact is necessary again. But again, coming back to work models, more flexible work time, I think Corona accelerated and triggered a very important cultural change. And this is something which I think we need to safeguard because the corporates need it. It will help in integrating any market, any person being at the location or also being outside, but dedicated towards contributing to hopefully one specific goal that the meeting has, that our meeting now has, or a big project needs to accomplish. And I think this is something that I hope that we can keep, but it still demands that we start to unlearn habits from the past to really embrace fully the new.
It's habits and sort of belief systems, I guess, as well, right? Because at the end, it used to be kind of the person who's present, who is the person who is remembered. Or I think here in our group, we have a lot of parental leavers who then even start coming back and let's say part-time during parental leave. And then they realize that if they're always at home in the home office, they're not visible, right? They're not there. And if you don't put your, like one of us was sort of mentioning, if you don't put your camera on, they don't see you, you don't exist. It's sort of, there are a couple of things that, yes, you do need to remember, you can do, but there are also some kind of belief system that the entire culture sort of needs to change. And I think the interesting part is, and the verdict is probably still out, is which of these models is the one that actually leads to a career, and which of these models is that leads to a better combination of, let's say, job and family, but not career and family. Mm-hmm. And I think that verdict is probably still out. But I think we will have a couple of years to experience that. And with the shift on the labor market in terms of lack of skilled labor, there might be a bit more of a push into that direction. I would like to ask you two last questions. One is, do you have any specific tips from your perspective for parental leavers who are right now in parental leave, who right now asking themselves exactly these questions? Which kind of work model can I do? How can I come back? How does that look out for my career? From your perspective, that would be fantastic.
Well, I think is it a tip? I think it's a very personal issue on how you personally want to combine career and family. And there is nothing which is right or wrong. I think each parent, each family, each partnership needs to find somehow an individual answer, and it should not be pressured by anyone, nor I would say any societal expectation. I think this is one tip that I would have. And also it starts with enjoying that moment, because it is so short. I mean, at the end, I understood that some children being present here as well this morning turned already 8, and you see, it changes every day. And I would say not being pressured and enjoying the moment. I think this is my first tip. Second is from a personal perspective, and as you have heard, my son was born in Paris in a French culture. I had and I still have a lot of friends living still in France or working for a French company. The concept of parental leave, as we understand it here in Germany, is something that I admit that I was super lucky, because I experienced my parental leave somehow with the day when my son was born, and for me it never somehow ended. After a specific certain period of time. So I defined, but maybe this is a very French topic, but I defined my parental leave as something that is never ending. Because I will be always the mother of my son, and since he is born, I try to combine family and career in the most positive way that I can and I feel comfortable with. And I think this is something that will stay, and that at every stage in my life I'm fully in.
That's a great tip. Parental leave, a never-ending story, guys. So this is a very great tip. And then, okay, so this is bringing me to the last question. Which of your leadership skill actually used to be a parenting skill? So which parenting skill, other way around, which parenting skill were you able to convert into leadership skill that is now guiding you and that you keep in your management sort of toolbox?
Yeah, I have to admit that I was always fantastic in time management, and I have to say that this is something that I would say even became stronger. So I was already always quite good in time management and being organized, and I can just recommend having a good time management, being well organized. Anticipating is something that is not only positive in a working life, is also super positive, I would say, and I would judge it as such in the personal life, being a mom. But I have to admit that there was something that I was not very, very good at. I think you can say it as such. I was not a good listener. And having my son now, he just turned 9 a couple of months ago. And I have to admit that this is something I really learned from him. Understanding him, listening to him. And this is something that I really started to turn as well now for me personally here in my leadership skills. And you will recognize it over the years. They start differently to communicate, to express themselves, and being capable in identifying and understanding and listening, giving it a moment, being patient, just waiting. This is something that I was not very good at, being rather an impatient person, and I started to be much more patient, and I really turned that into one of my leadership skills in listening. And having that patience, and in particular also being open for people who want to express something and you don't get it immediately, by not judging too quickly.
This is fantastic. I mean, I think you could. This could be an entire model of an entire model of ours, where we try to basically see that the non-verbal child, right in the baby stage, they can already, through just screaming, kind of allow you to learn active listening skills. And then later, as you said, I mean, 9 years old is not really teenager yet, but one of our trainers always says that once you have teenagers, you learn the skill on how to hug a cactus. And that's also something that is coming along our way. So I think with active listening skills, you're well prepared for this. Thank you so much. I hope you stay with us for a question and answer session. But I would like to end this interview here now. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ricarda. And again, MyCollective.